Indeed, it is time for the Burning Platform, which, of course, every week we take to looking at all the current affairs stories that are in the news. We look at what's going on in people's lives and the things people are most concerned with. And this morning's Burning Platform is no different. I'm very pleased to welcome to the show this morning someone who's no stranger to us. He is Chris Yelland. How are you, sir?
All very well, Gareth. Thanks for having me, and good morning to your listeners.
Nice to see you, Chris. Although when we're speaking to you, it's usually because things aren't going very well at Eskom. So, when are things going well at Eskom? You're pretty much busy 24/7 then, right?
Yeah, it has been a busy year, a busy 10 years, in fact. As we face these energy issues, it's become something that is on every single person's mind, every business, every farmer, every individual, every worker, because electricity impacts every single one of us.
Absolutely. So I'm looking forward to hearing your input and your thoughts and your expertise on all of this. We're also going to welcome Koketso Resane. Hey, Koketso, nice to see you. How are you?
I'm doing great. It's a lovely morning, so let's keep it moving. Good to be here for the first time.
So I'm very happy to have you on, Koketso. You're a business informatics professional. You're also a conservative social commentator and a co-host on the libertarian ManPatria Podcast. And we've spoken to Dumo Denga here before, and he's obviously a colleague of yours. But it's nice to have a fresh face on the Burning Platform.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so gents, let's just start off, Chris. It seems obvious, but Pumi, do you mind if I start off with asking Chris, what is the state of affairs in our massive and revolting monopolistic power supplier? What's going on there? And I see people, new faces on TV, explaining to us how everything is under control. I saw a new guy the other day who I've never seen before, making excuses for Eskom. Is their PR department in overdrive, or is there actually change happening?
I think there is slow change happening. It's a long haul, but the restructuring is in process, and it's very necessary. And there's a lot of effort being placed in sorting out procurement issues, making sure that it's less wastage. There's a lot of effort going into operational issues. That is the sort of performance of the fleet. I think it's much less successful than they would hope for, or we would hope for. There are diminishing returns to maintenance of old clapped out plant. And ultimately, we've got to look towards new plant that replaces the old plant as the way forward. Maintenance can only take you so far. And you can keep a car going almost forever, but you cannot push it hard forever. You can drive it on a Sunday to church, to weddings. But if you need a workhorse, you have got to have more than a vintage car that has been severely abused. But I think the other thing I want to say, Gareth, is that we mustn't only look to Eskom's dysfunctionality. The problems in the energy sector go much further than that, from the Eskom to the municipal electricity sector, and in fact to the whole energy sector, which really needs a thorough relook.
So, Chris, first of all, I drove to Mpumalanga just the other day, and I drove past either Kusile or Medupi or both. And I was looking at them, and they're these huge constructions, right? And they're not that old. I mean, these were built quite recently, but they seem to always be in dysfunction. There's always some problem. There's always something going on, whether it's coal supply or whether it's one of the units that has gone down, one of them that hasn't been maintained. What is the state of affairs there? Because we paid an absolute fortune for those two new power stations, and we haven't done anything since then. So we're still relying on them, and we haven't got plans to build any new ones, do we?
Not from Eskom, no. So Medupi and Kusile are the last of Eskom's new build, and nothing on the plan of the integrated resource plan for electricity, which looks at the next 10 years, is any further new build coming from Eskom besides this Medupi and Kusile. And to make your point, the performance of these plants is very, very far from what it should be. The plants have actually brought Eskom to its very knees. And not only that, impacted massively on the economy of South Africa, not just from cost time overruns, which are expensive indeed, but more from the impact on the economy of load shedding. If those plants had been delivered on time and on budget, we wouldn't have load shedding today. So, for example, Kusile power station, running 6-7 years late at the moment, is only half built. And that half that has been built is performing worse than the very worst of Eskom's old coal-fired power station. So it should be helping to bring up the average energy availability factor, but it's actually bringing it down. So the performance of 50% of the plant is only about 30% of what it should be. So 30% of 50% is about, 15%. And that's what we're getting instead of the design output. And that's not acceptable.
For me, I mean, I know this is something we've spoken about so many times. You're probably sick of it too. I know lots of people are sick of it, but we've got to address these things. What do you
Gareth,
want
your
to
face.
know from Chris? Yeah, I know. I'm horrified.
Fix your face.
I know.
Well, one of the things, and a couple of days ago, I think there was a statement at a press conference with Eskom CEO Derrida saying that there's not only is Eskom suffering from all of the issues you're talking about now, Chris, of kind of output and procurement inefficiencies and all of that kind of stuff. He also talked about a skills shortage, which kind of made me sit up and go, wow, okay. So all these many years later, the skills gap hasn't been identified and planned for and covered. And is the skills gap maybe also not in the executive suite?
It is in the executive suite. There is an executive who's responsible for human resources. But to be honest, I hear very, very little from her. Elsie Pule. I never see her at these media briefings, and I don't hear a lot of statements coming from her. We do hear from the CEO and the COO about these human resource issues, and I think it's true to say that morale at Eskom is very, very low, and this is leading to loss of good people, black and white. And I think the skills issue is real. And one of the most concerning issues is that the skills issues that has been raised by the CEO and the COO at Koeberg. Now, Koeberg is obviously a nuclear power station and has long been a kind of a flagship of Eskom for good performance. And it's currently undergoing what is said to be the most complex upgrade project in the history of Koeberg since it was commissioned. And at the same time, the COO, says that he's worried. It keeps him awake at night. The loss of skilled people who are lost to international projects, projects taking place in Egypt, Turkey, in the Middle East, in India. They are poaching good people and leaving Eskom under-resourced at a very critical time during this upgrade.
Sure.
I don't want you to feel like.
What about the private sector?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
So, no, sorry. So when you talk about like a skills, sorry, Koketso, talking about a kind of a skills migration, also then, for me, alerts us to possibly a private sector also starting up that is absorbing these skills. Sure, some are leaving the country, but is there some kind of private sector or private, and we hear lots of talk about the IPPs, the independent power producers, and there's been murmurings of a whole lot of those IPPs being signed off and possibly coming on stream soon? Yes, no?
Now look, the kind of skills within Eskom are quite wide-ranging, from very specialized engineering skills through to project management skills, administrative skills, procurement, etc. So I think the people at Eskom are in demand across a wide range of sectors, including the private sector in South Africa, as well as internationally. So you have to be competitive. Your salaries have to be competitive, but it's more than just money. It's also about satisfaction and growth and a feeling of working in an environment that is really positive and moving forward. And unfortunately, the environment at the moment at Eskom, the morale is low. They're coming under a lot of pressure. There was a time when Eskom people were very proud to wear their Eskom windbreaker. Today, you don't want to wear that because
people attack you in the street.
There's hostility out there. So
does Andre the Raider then know what to do to turn those things around? I mean, he doesn't have a shiny track record in other industries either.
Well, my my personal opinion is that he does know what to do, but it's a team effort. Eskom is not one man or one woman. It's 40,000 people. And the real test of leadership is to inspire people, to inspire your board, to instill them with confidence, to inspire your executive team, and drive the ethos and the vision and mission of the company through many, many layers of people. And being an executive, like being a leader, is about having a vision, understanding the challenges and threats that are facing you, trying to find those opportunities, and then motivating a team, because it cannot be done by one person. It's such a massive project.
So, Koketso, I don't want you to think that we're ignoring you, but I promise you your time is coming, and then Chris is going to feel like he doesn't want to talk about the State of the Nation address and all this kind of thing. So, I mean, do you have any questions relating to energy? Because you, just like all the rest of us, sometimes sit in the dark. You have work to do. It gets in the way of productivity. It ruins, for many people, their opportunity to get things done at home or at work. What kinds of questions do you have for Chris Yelland this morning? Because I've got one other one, but I'll throw it in after you have a go.
Thanks. Yeah, maybe it's to just bring it back home a little bit. The question I have is, if you go to any company, as soon as the best talent leaves, management typically gets involved and say, right, how do we stop the flight of, our best human capital here? In an unfortunate scenario, they tend to leave for the competition. In our case, that would then be leaving to, like you mentioned, Europe, the Middle East, even North Africa, where they are really looking to expand on their energy grid. So in a normal scenario, management steps in and says, right, we need to stop this because the cost around losing your best employees is quite a heavy one. But you really don't see much of that kind of thinking happening at Eskom. So my question is, firstly, what is actually being done about the swaths of engineers who are available, who are in the country, who are actually, to some degree able to help alleviate the problem at the very least? You never hear of it. Instead, there's always one problem compounding into another. Then the second short one, again, is if you go to any company, sort of project such as Kusile or Medupi actually fail, people are normally, you lose your job, for lack of a better term, you lose your job, you're replaced. Something happens that, isn't pleasant for the people or person responsible. In Eskom's case, we like to think about the CEO a lot because the CEO swapped hands quite a few times over the last few years, but who is actually responsible for these massive portfolios, which are a drain on the tax budget, which are a drain on, money that could have been used for other things? So, yeah, that's my other question there.
Damn right. Accountability. So, Chris, you want to have a go at that?
Yeah, look, let's first of all look at the human resource issues. As I say, I agree with you. We don't hear enough about the human resource issues. And we don't hear enough from the executive responsible for HR. There is, of course, a dilemma at Eskom. On the one hand, Eskom itself would acknowledge that they are, in fact, overstaffed. And there are efforts to reduce the staff complement. Of course, their hands are somewhat tied because the president has announced there will be no retrenchments. So they have to rely on voluntary severance packages as well as natural attrition, and it is having an effect. The numbers are coming down. At the same time, they need more of the right kind of people with specific skills. And so I do hear, and I've been to some media briefings where they have detailed that they are searching for and recruiting key people in the generation sector, which is the sector that is performing so badly at the moment. So something is happening, but I'm sure not enough.
On the question about responsibility and accountability and who has been making these terrible decisions and whether or not they've paid the price.
Yeah, we know that during the years of state capture, things at Eskom were frankly completely out of control. At board level, there were the wrong appointments by a number of ministers, Minister Brown, Minister Gigaba. The wrong people were put in place for the wrong reasons at board level, at the CEO level, at the executive level. The organization was out of control. Procurement was completely, totally out of control. Coal procurement and all other kinds of procurement.
Yep.
And you have to look at the project management was out of control at Medupi and Kusile. And we know about the irregularities at Kusile because they are well publicized and in the public domain. And so this period, and I'm not saying it only started 5 years ago or 6 or 7 years ago during the years of state capture, even before then.
We had load shedding when Alec Irwin was the minister in that portfolio. Do you remember? And everybody says, oh, no, but the Thabo Mbeki administration, everything ran well. They stopped looking after the power plants and they stopped planning forward in advance. And we know that the Guptas made a ton of cash out of mostly the coal side of things. In fact, that's probably where they made the lion's share of their money. But we don't hear about any heads rolling. We see these guys pitching up at the hearings in front of Judge Zondo. But nothing's happened to them. They're probably still living large, nice big pension.
Of course, accountability in South Africa is an area that needs to be addressed. I mean, but let's be fair. Eskom itself is not an investigating authority. It's got a hard enough job doing what it's supposed to do, and that is to provide abundant, low-cost, reliable electricity to business, to industry, to consumers, to farmers, etc. And these kind of investigations are very distracting. Eskom says that they have now placed volumes of evidence before the Special Investigation Unit, before the prosecuting authorities, and really it's their job to take it forward. And we know it's not just at Eskom, but across the board that the prosecuting authorities seem to be overwhelmed, under-resourced, hollowed out, and are just not producing the prosecutions. They're not even bringing them to court, let alone achieving prosecution. So I think the problem there goes well beyond Eskom. There is a new era of accountability at Eskom. I'm sure there's lots more to be done, plenty. But at least there's a new attitude. We've still got to see that drive through the organization and also drive through the prosecuting authorities and then finally the courts.
Well, that's a good segue. It's a good segue because the one thing that part 2 of the Zondo Commission has been almost everybody has concentrated on between Lynn Brown, Minister Gigaba, and Eskom have been a big focus of the second part of the Zondo Commission, because that then has laid out, again, thousands and thousands and thousands of very small parts, where all the moving parts are, who did what when. The investigations were done by the commission, by the commission's investigators. There's lots of evidence sitting out there, but, and this past Sunday again, I saw a little opinion piece coming out of Ms. Shamila Batoy's office, written by Ms. Shamila Batoy, saying, listen, it's going to take a while. So,
TikTok.
While we wait.
Yeah. May I just add your point? Yes, the volume 1 and volume 2 have been very illuminating. But the big one is volume 3. Volume 3 is going to deal with Eskom. So volume 2 did touch on Minister Brown and Minister Gigaba, but more in their roles at SAA and Denel and Transnet. Eskom is still to come. And I think at the end of this month is going to be very, very revealing as to where the problems were at Eskom itself.
But I think most of us are done with revelations. Most of this information, we've seen it, we've heard it, it's in passing. Some of it has been very clearly laid out in all sorts of investigative journalism reports, all of that kind of stuff. We're done. Okay, we don't need it to be. We don't need it to be shown to us. We just want somebody in like orange overalls.
Yeah.
We want somebody in orange overalls. We want to see people. We want to see heads roll.
Look, I agree entirely, but I'm sort of an energy guy and electricity guy, and so yes, those are issues facing South Africa as a country that have to be dealt with. But when it comes to Eskom, it's kind of out of its hands. Once it hands over the evidence to the prosecuting authorities, it's done what it can do, what's within its power to do, and I think there is more to be done, yes, but it has done quite a lot.
Chris, I'm going to let you go after this because we want to get into Dali Mpofu, AfriForum. We want to talk about state capture some more and stuff that's non-related to energy. And I'm very much aware of your time and the fact that you've got a lot of people that you have to give expertise to. But before we go, the amount of money we've spent and wasted, which is exorbitant. We could have built some of the best nuclear energy in the world, and we could have powered up most of this continent if we'd been really thoughtful about this. Nuclear really is the only way that we're going to be able to provide enough energy. If we did solar and we covered the entire Karoo in solar panels, maybe we'd get close. Wind, sure, a little bit of water, but all of that together isn't going to get us near the amount of energy we need, right? So we should have just maybe gone down that path in the very beginning. And of course, people are nervous about nuclear because when they think nuclear, they think Chernobyl and they think 3 Mile Island. But let's be fair, it's the cleanest, safest, and most energy productive way of creating the kind of electricity volumes that we need. We should have just done that. Looking back now with the benefit of hindsight, do you agree with me or not?
No, completely disagree, Gareth. Nuclear ticks some of the boxes, but it has very significant issues. The business case for nuclear is very, very poor. And what we need in South Africa going forward, nuclear will not solve that problem. So let me just try and paint the reality. The reality is that right now we face a shortage of electricity of about 6,000 megawatts.
Okay.
Nuclear, they're only talking about 2,500 megawatts, and they're only talking about it in 2035. There is no solution in the next 15 years, number one. Number two, in the next 15 years, the penetration of variable renewable energy is going to increase in the mix from currently about 6% to about 35% of the mix. Now, that is variable renewable energy. What we need to complement variable renewable energy is not a steady source of power that runs 24 hours a day. What we need is flexible generation that can fill the gaps in the variable renewable energy. 2,500 megawatts of fixed capacity running 24 hours a day does not solve anything of the need to complement 25,000 megawatts of renewable energy, variable renewable energy. What we need is flexible renewable energy. Now, let me just say that why are we getting this massive increase in problematic variable renewable energy? Why? Because it is so cheap. It is coming in now, the latest bid window, at 47 cents a kilowatt hour, which is half the price of coal and about a third to a quarter of the price of new nuclear. So we have to buy as much cheap energy as we can, get our hands on, and we need to deal with the problems that variable renewable energy brings, which is its variability. Right. And the way to deal with that problem is not nuclear and it's not coal, it's gas to power, it's battery storage, and it's other energy storage technologies that are emerging.
Listen, at this point, Chris, I'm gonna bow to your superior knowledge on the subject, but I really just hope someone somewhere is going to start implementing this stuff soon. Otherwise, we're going to find ourselves in the dark a whole lot more often. It's always good to catch up with you, Chris Yelland, of course, an energy analyst an electrical engineer, a public speaker, writer, consultant, and the MD at EE Business Intelligence. Thank you very much for making time for us this morning, Chris.
Thank you, Gareth, and thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you very much. There we go. Chris Yelland. So, Koketso, the stage is yours now. Let's just talk about a few things on your agenda, because a lot of people in the comments are talking about Dali Mpofu, and maybe we should start with him because he is the subject of much conversation. I mean, I've got my own feelings about him as a human being, and I like the guy. He obviously helped me out in my case against Mnet, and we won. And he's a smart man, and he's by no means someone who should be discounted as being an important figure in both politics and the law. But he also is someone who attracts a huge amount of attention. He seems to be all over the place at the moment. People are talking about him at the Judicial Services Commission. They're saying he's defending the guy who set fire to Parliament. They're saying he's defending Jacob Zuma. He seems to be the busiest man in the legal business in South Africa. What are your feelings on whether he might be doing things right, wrong, spreading himself a bit thin, whether or not he's a credible human being anymore, and what kind of stuff you'd like to communicate in terms of what you think of Dali Mpofu?
Well, so yeah, asterisk, I've never met the man, but I honestly believe he is building a cult of personality that is building a cloud around him that says he is a superstar legal expert lawyer who, given the backdrop of him and the EFF, is effectively doing this for Black people. Now, there's people who fall for it. I certainly don't, because at the end of the day, he is securing the bag. Unfortunately, with him being all over the places, the smart thing would be to rather say, let me build a career based on stacks and stacks of me winning in court. Dali isn't making that approach. He wants to be at the forefront of every contentious case, every case that involves some form of social, social discord out there in the public about who's innocent and who's not, particularly with issues regarding race. I don't think it's a good move, because as a legal professional, you'd rather be known for your work and not necessarily the type or the kind of client you typically take on. And it's going to bite him. But I believe he's doing this because he's got grander ambitions in future, maybe to be a chief justice or something of that type. I don't know. But yeah, as someone who's not a legal expert, etc., I'll just say that, look, he's all over the place and he's trying to build a cult of personality around himself.
Pumi, you've been in advertising, branding for a long, long time. You know this stuff. Do you think that's I mean, I'm quite impressed by the fact that Koketso sees a long-term plan here. Is that what you think Dali's up to? Do you think he's building this cult of personality so he can capitalize at some point? I mean, he's probably making money in the meantime anyway.
I think Dali is about making money, and no matter what people around Dali might want to tell us, Dali is not a victim here. Okay, so Dali is unfortunately for him, the cases that he takes on and the way in which he takes those cases on, he's not winning in terms of making himself this kind of call Dali Mpofu. If you're in trouble, call Dali Mpofu, but the kind of people who do call on Dali Mpofu and the people whose calls he does answer, are a particular type of person. Somebody said in the comments here that he seems to be kind of like Zuma cronies. That's who he's answering for.
Back
I'm
against
just saying,
the wall.
You know what? And unfortunately, when you listen to him argue, the cases that he argues, his arguments are flimsy. So he doesn't make a case for himself. If he is trying to build a cult of personality around himself and the cases he takes on, he better start winning some. He's doing more. He's doing more in getting people's cases thrown out, and then he has gotten people off. So I feel sorry for Mafu. Is it Mafu, the guy with the parliamentary fire? Mafe. I feel sorry for him because I'm kind of going, is Dali the person that you want in your corner? Because he doesn't seem to, he tends to take on cases and then say, oh, it's a racial matter. Everything for him is so superficial. So I don't know if he's building towards becoming a chief justice. He may get there if certain people's political careers go in a particular way.
Yeah.
But on his own merits, I don't think he's going to do it. And
So,
this
guys,
kind of casting him. So, and I do just want to say, and this kind of casting him now, with all of the hoo-ha around him and how he behaved at the JSE, at the interviews, of casting him as some kind of, again, victim, is just reprehensible. Dali was awful. No one. So a lot of people are talking about the kind of the insinuation around Dunstan Mlambo and the unproven rumors of sexual misconduct. Lots of people are talking about that. And very few people are talking about the fact that Dali basically said to Judge Maya, insinuated that he and Judge Maya had spent the night together on some. And it's like, that's so disgusting, so slimy. That is tantamount to, to sexual harassment too.
it is absolutely, and the fact that he's doing that just because she is a woman is even more outrageous, because he's the one who kept saying, no, we need to have women represented and all of this stuff. It's a personal issue which he's brought out into the public, and I think she should sue him for it, frankly.
Personal issue? It's not even a personal issue. It's a non-thing.
Don't you
what
think
if she should? It's irrelevant in that context.
Absolutely.
Of just, he worked for her, and they had, like, with one other person, and overnight kind of preparing for, and so he's just like,
but he's clearly trying to undermine, and to make her seem foolish. And if that isn't a classic misogynistic move, I don't know what is. So anyway, I do want to move on from him, because I know you guys are so excited about the State of the Nation address today. You're so excited to hear from our Chief Executive Officer of the country, the President, Matamela Cyril Ramaphosa. So what are we expecting? Because I saw headlines in some of the news outlets, not surprisingly the ones that love Cyril, the ones who were praying for Cyril in 2020. They're all saying, it's great expectations ahead of SONA 2022. I'm less enthusiastic. Am I in good company this morning or not?
Look, I think I'm nervous more than anything about what's going to happen later tonight.
Why?
So this particular State of the Nation, maybe there's something to be said in that Cyril has to do the unfortunate thing of delivering a State of the Nation not in the National Assembly, because that's actually gone up in flames. So it's not a good look, firstly, and he has to say something just around that, just so he can effectively cover himself for the future. But I'm nervous because I'm afraid that he might just turn this entire debacle into post-COVID recovery, etc., etc. And the unfortunate thing is, post-COVID recovery, at least in Cyril's mind, involves some form of broad-based Black economic empowerment for the nation at whole, etc. And as someone who is the second biggest beneficiary of BEE, of course, that's all he knows. And unfortunately for the clear masses, BEE isn't really working. So I'm just afraid that he's going to shove BEE fixing the economy, etc., down our throats. And that's really not what you want to do to get things back on track. What about all the other non-BEE compliant businesses that have been affected by the lockdown? So I'm afraid he's going to do that. There's also talk that our taxes might actually go up as well, which again is a terrible idea. The middle class has significantly dwindled during the pandemic, and the last thing you want to do is actually then come out and say that, right, thank you, middle class, the few of you who actually remain in the country A and still have a job B, we are going to siphon additional funds out of your payslip because, hey, we need to recover, right? There's no benevolence in any of that, unfortunately. It's the same hymn book that Cyril himself particularly is well versed in singing out of, and really that's what makes me nervous. This is not how you put a country back on track. Ideally, what he should have been doing was making life a little bit easier so that people can recover of their own accord. Get your skills out there in the marketplace and actually do something you're good at, which in turn will not just feed you and your family, but will help build the country. That's not going to happen. I'm afraid Cyril's going to use the entire SONA as a means to say, this is how we're going to rebuild the country. And if you're not Black, then you're not invited to the table.
What do you have to say, Pumi? I mean, are you looking forward to the State of the Nation address? You're such a big Cyril fan.
So, the job of the State of the Nation address is supposed to lay out for the rest of us what the plans of Cyril and his cabinet are for the coming year. They're supposed to set the tempo of the things that are important and the things that they will be concentrating on and the things that they will be working towards. And what we've seen in the past with Cyril is a lot of pie in the sky. So, Cyril first came out with his Tumamina.
And smart
which
cities.
Sounded...
Don't forget smart cities,
Which sounded so like, this guy is, and very at the time, sort of kind of setting a tone that says, this is a person who's going to do something. So Tumamina, as everybody now knows, means send me, right? And he was kind of standing up and saying, I'm going to get the job done. A year later, we were all like, whoa, really? But the year later was also in the lockdowns. And at the beginning of the epidemic, we saw him come out and be very strong and kind of looking at everything else that was happening in the world. And we thought, okay, he's going to take control. He's going to use this opportunity. He's going to clean up.
Nothing.
Instead, what we saw was PPE scandals, right? And we saw money being stolen in unprecedented kind of amounts. And Cyril's done nothing about it. He's done nothing about it except come out and say, this won't stand. This won't, he started out by saying, this won't happen. And then it happened. And then he came out and he said, this won't stand. Something will be done about it. And we're still waiting for something to be done about it. So, and then smart cities, all pie in the sky. And we're kind of going, yeah, can you just get the electricity running? So we're going to have more of that. We're going to have more of Cyril's kind of pie in the sky. This is what we... But we're not going to have concrete things out of Cyril. We're not going to get anything concrete out of him. We're not going to get any concrete commitments out of him. We're not going to get any concrete feedback from him that says, in the past year, this is what we've done and this is what we've gotten right. And we're not going to get that from him.
Well,
unfortunately.
he's got very little to boast about, actually. And in the light of all the state capture stuff that's going on, which we mustn't forget happened while he was number 2 in the government. Again, everybody seems to just conveniently forget the fact that while all of this was going down, he was sitting there watching it, and claims that he was shocked by everything when it was eventually revealed.
And we're going to get more of the mainstream media's credibility stripped away from them because they're going to treat him with kid gloves. We're going to come out of it, and their post-analysis is going to be softly, all nice about him. So we're getting more erosion of kind of the trust that we have in that third estate. But and as you know, I remain hopeful that the country, the people within us are beginning, the veil has fallen, right? So the people have begun to see what isn't working with Cyril and his party. People are now quite aware of the fact that it's not Cyril is unable to turn the ANC around and get rid of the rotten apples in the ANC. People can now see that it's the ANC that is the problem. It's everybody that is the problem.
Ironically, their idea of collective responsibility has come full circle, and now they will end up paying the price collectively. I mean, it can't happen too soon, if you ask me. We thought the last election would be a lot more decisive, but every day, less and less of the power that they once had, and they'll never get it back. It's a one-way street, and it's all heading downhill for them. So let's just look at one other thing, because we are kind of running short on time, and there's a lot that I want to talk about with Koketso this morning. But Koketso, one of the big stories of this week is that AfriForum decided to take Mbuyiseni Ndlozi to court, and they also said that Julius and many people in the EFF have been romanticizing the idea of killing Boers. There's also the question of whether or not a direct threat was made by Mbuyiseni when he tweeted something the other day about, we'll show you with guns and bombs and all kinds of things. What do you think's really going on there? And is the media again just glomming on to a race story because it gets attention, it's clickbait, or is there something real going on here that needs a bit of our attention this morning?
Look, I don't think any threat to life should be taken lightly, whether it's put in a song or it's actually, hearsay in a conversation, that sort of thing. And that's exactly what the EFF, Mbuyiseni, Julius, etc. That's exactly what they did when they go around chanting the song. It's not a nice song. It's not a good song, and it's in effect saying that these people or certain class of people are not deserving of life, and that's something that has to be taken seriously. In an ideal world, you would have loved to see the South African Human Rights Commission step in. They're a Chapter 9 institution, of course, but they seem to be very selective in terms of cases they take on. They were very quick to jump on the Clicks shampoo bandwagon, of course, but when the EFF sings "Kill the Boer," they are nowhere to be found. Instead, they even made a statement basically saying that no, they do not classify that as hate speech because, there is freedom of speech within political circles. So ideally, it should have actually gone to the SAHRC, started there and then stopped there, slapped the EFF with a fine, told them not to do it again. Instead, they didn't do that, and hence AfriForum have then decided to take this thing to court. The worst part about this whole thing is people actually don't want to look at the case on its own merit. They just see it as EFF equal, therefore they're racist, versus AfriForum, therefore they're racist. And then they literally see it as a black versus white thing. And I don't believe that's how we should actually approach these things. Look at the case on its own merit and look at what is actually being fought over in court. And that is a hate speech line item in a song, which we know they do tend to cause harm. I mean, look what happened in Senegal it feels like just a year ago, but it's effectively almost a year and a half ago now, where songs were sang that basically incited people to go out into the field and cause property damage and steal from the farm, etc. And that's exactly what happened. So there is a case to be made that when you say "kill the Boer," you are in effect saying that I am empowering you to actually take the life of someone who happens to be Afrikaans, who happens to be a farmer. And that is a direct threat on their life, which should be taken seriously. So I really do hope that the EFF do learn their lesson from this. I hope they get slapped with yet another cost order with this whole thing as well, because I believe we need to set a precedent that in our project to build the country, which is taking longer than it should, by the way, we really shouldn't be going backwards.
Like Medupi, right?
Yeah, like Kosile and Midupi, we really shouldn't be doing things like this if we really want to, advocate for human rights at a basic level and nation building at a secondary level after that.
And the demonstration outside that court by EFF supporters is not going to help their case. But the EFF don't learn. The EFF don't learn from these experiences. I mean, the EFF currently are the single biggest institutional donor to AfriForum because of the number of cost orders that they've had to pay.
That's a hell of a way to look at it.
But they are. I mean, they have had to pay AfriForum. I think this is the third time that they're going after them for a cost order, and they've lost the other two, by the way. So they are the single biggest institutional donor to AfriForum. So they don't learn.
So in their hate, they're actually funding the people they have disdain for.
Yeah, that seems to me like a fair way for us to balance out the things that they say. You look at what the things are that they have to do. All right, so guys, it's maybe worth just referring very briefly to some of the things that are going on internationally. We haven't spoken about Ukraine and Russia at all. Do either of you have any peculiar insights to this? Do you have any analysis you want to share on Russia, on Ukraine? Because it's bubbling there in the background, but no one's pressing any actual buttons to make things go. Do you think this is going to be World War III, or do you think it's going to be a damp squib?
So normally what happens is if people credibly feel threatened, they tend to flee their country. Long before tanks actually roll in, as a man, you might just decide, let me take my family and let's move to greener pastures. Let me ensure the safety of my loved ones and my offspring, etc. and mothers will do the same, even if it means leaving your husband behind. We see this in parts of the Middle East where, women risk it all effectively to leave.
Yes.
You don't see this happening with Ukrainians. They are not fleeing the country en masse. They are not looking to emigrate immediately. And that, for me, tells me that they don't take this thing as serious as some of the Western media would like us to believe. Now, there is something to be said in that every time a sitting US president is under extreme pressure, part of the list of options here to really rescue their presidency, especially if they're still in their first term, which Biden is in, part of this is to say, okay, hang on a minute, the situation is bad. We need to go to war. By going to war, what that then does is it kicks off that military-industrial complex into high gear. People are then employed. Money starts flowing from the government into people's hands, and therefore people are then happy with the presidency because, it means that you get to put food on the table, buy 2.5 cars,
Is
and
this
build the picket fence.
The wag the dog theory? So you reckon that this is a knee-jerk response or a calculated response from the Biden regime because they are plunging into new depths on their polling at the moment? And also, if you notice in America that the blue states and the cities that have been the most masked, the most vaccine strong, all the rest of it, are suddenly pulling back and changing direction as they realize that they're out of step with the ordinary American who's sick to death of COVID. They're all starting to change just because they know the midterm elections are coming up. You really think it's that cynical, Koketso?
So I don't think that
Yeah.
Biden will do that, though. I think that the American population is a little bit wary of war, and the way in which they left that Afghanistan kind of makes it difficult for them at this point. It's to make it a popular decision, which is what the Vlad is counting on, right? That's why he keeps pressing that button. There's a very interesting, and it's a photo essay on New York Times. Yesterday, I think they put it up. You talk about what is happening in the Ukraine. And looking at those images, it reminded me very much of what we see in Zimbabwe, where people are still living there. So we here in South Africa have this particular view, and that's what's happening in the Ukraine too. There is a particular view of what's happening in the Ukraine, but when you see the bombed houses from where there has been active engagement between the fighting forces, when you see those bombed houses, when you see the barbed wire, separating Russia and the Ukraine. And then at the very same time, kind of look further afield from where there is no active fighting, and you see the ordinary person trying to get to their job in some chemical plant. Or there's a very touching image actually of a lady walking past, and there's kind of a half-bombed building, and she's got her little groceries walking past, and graffiti on the wall. Then it's a very tense situation that's happening there. I also watch a lot of RT. I still watch lots of Russian media. It's a very tense situation, but you can see the game that's being played out there with people's lives. It's a game being played out with people's lives, and it's horrendous, to say the least, for me. So Putin is pushing his luck, but he knows that America on the other side is weak. Joe Biden is going to be reluctant to get into this war because the American people don't have a taste for it because of what happened to them in Afghanistan. So and now he's brought China to his side,
I don't think actually that your analysis, either of them, are mutually exclusive, because I do think Pumi's just looking at it from the Russian point of view, and you're looking at it from the American point of view, Koketso. But it could work out well for both. Putin could get to take the Ukraine on as a vassal state, and Biden could distract people long enough from his own domestic failure and his failure in Afghanistan to be able to ratchet up a few popularity points at the polls. But either way, the Democrats are pretty screwed in the US at the moment. And it seems like all the stuff they were really banking on, the only one that still works for them is, ironically, racism. And they pull this out every time they need something to save them. They're now using it against Joe Rogan, of all people. Do you have any thoughts on that, since you run your own podcast and we're talking about the world's biggest podcaster, Koketso?
Yeah, I think Rogan he's a soft target, really. A very notable distraction, if anything, there's this thought that goes out that perhaps Spotify has made Joe Rogan big, where that's not the case. Joe Rogan actually built himself up as a podcaster long before he got a lovely paycheck from Spotify. But I think he's a soft target in that no one can really claim him on the political spectrum, that is. And, as we know with much of the left, if you're not part of them, then you are an automatic enemy. And we've seen them do this to Rogan and others before. So I think he's a soft target. At the end of the day, it's textbook cancellation, really. And I don't think it's really going to work, because he's got too many friends now. And, as you've seen, even when people try to cancel you, Gareth, it'll die down, it'll just fade with the news cycle. And at the end of the day, you'll still carry on.
What do you both think of the fact that he apologized? I mean, we know in America, the N word is like a magic word, right? It has superpowers. Some people believe that there is something about that word that just imbues it with the properties like, Harry Potter might have, where he casts a spell. And what they've done is they've gone and cut a whole lot of clips of where either he was discussing the lyrics of a rap song, or he was quoting someone else, or he was talking about comedy and whether or not the N-word should be used in comedy. These are things that happened 9 years ago. And he apologized. He said, look, I genuinely feel if I've hurt someone that I should apologize, which I think is something he probably didn't have to do. The fact that he did do it shows that he's got, at least he's a good faith interlocutor in this case. But do you guys feel he had to apologize? Do you think that this is just America banging on the same old drum, or do you think that there is something about this that makes it extra sinister?
Well, so you go first.
Yeah, I think he shouldn't have apologized. He should have rather stood firm and said, right, this is not my belief, and I said what I said, and let's move on. I will do better. I would have apologized by saying something along those lines. But I mean, with that said, at the end of the day, if you can't forgive someone who's genuinely asking for forgiveness, which is what the mob isn't willing to do, they want him cancelled. They're not willing to take his apology and say, right, we hear you. If you're unwilling to actually forgive someone who's come out and said sorry, then it says a lot more about you than about them. And at the end of the day, I think cooler heads will prevail. And Joe Rogan must just keep a cool head. Don't do anything stupid. And the same goes for Spotify as well.
Pums, what do you say?
The thing about being in business, whatever business you're in, you always make decisions based on what's best for your bottom line. And I think Joe made a decision based on what's best for his bottom line. So making the apology, whether sincere or not, is a good move for the business that he is running, because it keeps him everybody's talking about him. It keeps him top of mind. It gets people to go back and listen to some of those podcasts. And that's what it's still show business. He is still in the business of show. And that's what this is all about. So it just keeps the dollars raking in, and he's made the right business decision, whether he believes it or not. And this being provocative works in America. And that's who Joe is. Being provocative works in America.
Maybe Joe's in a unique position because he can't really be cancelled. But for many people, the accusation of racism is a death knell. And, it's kind of like if you're a guy and you get accused of rape, even if it's not true, that it's been said is enough to ruin you sometimes. And I do think, I think the cost of real racism is still quite high. I mean, and it should be in some cases, but in other cases, it sometimes seems to me like it's the last stop when you can't get rid of someone with all the other stuff that you haven't got on them.
Unfortunately, I am a major cynic with the motivators of American culture. And one of the biggest motivators in American culture is making money. right? So we over here, far away, may see or hear a particular thing that then makes a blip. But then it dies down and we forget about it. What we never see on the aftermath of it is we never see the little tours that they go to. America is a big, big place. It is a big, big market. So for us over here, we might, Spotify might say, oh, we're going to take this person off our platform and we're not going to pay them this and this. What you don't see is you don't see the hundreds of little towns that they get to go on a tour on and still bring in and rake in their dollars as they then charge whatever $20 at the door for people to come in. There are millions and millions and millions of Americans who believe in all sorts of different things that may be reprehensible to the rest of us over here, far away. And we may never hear of those people again. But that doesn't mean that those people's lives have stopped.
You get the last word, Koketso.
Yeah, I think Pumi has, she's actually hit it right there, that it is a big place. But I like what you said, Gareth, and that, when all else fails, just throw in the accusation of racism. It seems to be the silver bullet that kills everyone who's deemed to be a vampire of some sort. But yeah, I think people do need to be mature over this. Just because you said something doesn't mean that it's necessarily bad. Everything has to be in context. I mean, how do you educate people about the N-word if you don't, or if you're not willing to say what the N-word actually is, for example? But yeah, I think props to Joe Rogan, though, for building up what he has built up. At the end of the day, when all of this dies down and everything fades away, Rogan will still be there. His podcast will still be there. It will still be the biggest in the world. And the only real change that's going to happen is he might be a little bit more careful about what he says in future. But yeah, he's still uncancelable. And at the end of the day, just leave him be and find something else to be angry about, or go find some other celebrity to accuse of racism, I guess.
Well, they've tried to cancel us, different groups of people at some point, and the burning platform continues. We're glad to have opinions like yours here as well. Thank you very much, Koketso. Big thank you to Chris Yelland, who was on a little bit earlier on, and most especially to you for joining us. Pumi, my partner in crime on the burning platform. We will see you next week. Magic. We'll see you tomorrow morning for another episode of this show. Don't miss it. Tomorrow, 6 a.m., bright and early. Make sure you're awake. Cheers.